Welcome, my name is Barbara Yarde and today I'm going to show you how to make some silver bangles. Here are a couple of I've made before. So this is one using square wire, round wire and half round wire. And each one of them has a texture, and the texture I've achieved on all three of them is just using the same hammer. For this project I'm using two types of wire. I'm going to be using round wire, and this is 2mm thick. I'm also using square wire, which is 1.5mm thick. But you can go thicker or thinner if you like. It's completely up to you. And each piece of wire I've taken is 210mm long, and that is the size of an average bracelet. But as we hammer, the wire will get longer, so we'll have to cut it down back to the 210mm. I'm also going to be using a large steel block, my hammer. I'm also going to need a rawhide mallet to round up my bangles. Using the rawhide mallet will keep your texture intact. You won't lose much texture when you use these hammers. I'm also going to need a bangle mandrel. I know these are quite an expensive piece of kit, but you can also use a wooden bangle mandrel, which are slightly cheaper, or anything household like a tin of baked beans will work quite well with this as well. You're also going to need a saw frame, a ruler, pair of calipers, and a pinch peg or somewhere to saw your piece. You're also going to need your solder station. Going to need your soldering block, your tweezers, your soldering brush, some solder, your flux or borax in a borax cone, and a torch. Now let's get started with the making. Now the first thing I do, I start to hammer my piece of wire. I'm going to hammer the whole piece of this wire from beginning to end. And I'm using my steel hammer and my steel block. I'm just trying to get a general organic texture on there. So that's the first one. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on my square bit of wire. Before I round them up into my round wire, I just need to measure them because hammering them may have lengthened more than I wanted. And then I will just trim the ends and anneal it just to soften the metal up a little bit more. The first thing I'm going to do is get a file and just make sure that one end on both of my pieces of wire are nice and straight. Now I'm going to measure my original length, which I wanted to be 210 millimeters, and I will mark that with a felt tip pen and trim. Just got to straighten out my wire to make sure it's nice and straight there. It's just a little bit longer than my 210, so I'm just marking it right there, and I will just file that little tiny bit off. I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the other one. Get the end that I've filed straight. Make sure my wire is straight. Measure 210 millimeters, and the 210 millimeters, that's a medium-sized bangle. I've got quite large wrists, and that fits me quite nicely. So again, we're just a tiny bit more. So I'm just going to mark 210. So the file I'm using is a half round file, and I'm using the flat section of the half round file. You can also use a flat file. So it's really whatever file you feel comfortable with. I've got a notch in my bench peg that I've anchored my piece of wire to, so it's nice and secure. And I hold my file to the end with my holding the handle. Don't hold it up here or in the middle. Hold it to the end so it's nice and comfortable. And make sure everything's straight. And what you need to do is file and lift away, file and lift away. This doesn't have to be a really fast movement. If you don't feel too comfortable with your filing at the beginning, just be really slow. It will get there. So I'm just filing this and trying to keep it as straight and flat as possible. I don't want to do that because I'll get a ski jump on my piece of metal. So I'm keeping it straight and lifting off. Now both pieces of wire have two straight ends, and they're both exactly the size that I wanted now. So before I round them both up, I'm just going to anneal them again because I've worked hard on them by hammering both pieces. I'm going to anneal both pieces at the same time just to save myself. And my block is quite small, so I'm just going to half them both, so just they sit neatly on the block. So I'm annealing my pieces, and this will soften my metal. The reason I'm annealing is because I've been hammering my metal, and when you hammer metal or do anything to it really, filing, putting it through the rolling mill or anything like that, it hardens it up and it just makes it a little more difficult for you to work with, and you do have the potential for it to crack. So when you anneal a piece of metal, just make it slightly softer and it makes it easier for you to work with. When you're annealing a piece of silver, you're looking for a nice pink colour. I'm not going to go for the total pink colour because I just want to soften this slightly, not too much. So that should be enough. I'm just going to leave it on my soldering block just for a second, and then I'm going to pickle it, dry it, and I'll come back and show you how to round it up, and then we'll solder.